Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 35. The Animated Series Season 1, Episodes 3 and 4. One of our planets is missing, and the Lorelei signal.
Captain's log supplemental. At Warp 8, we will intercept the cloud before it reaches the inhabited planet Mantilles. But we are uncertain what we can do to stop a matter-energy cloud which measures thousands of times more than our vessel.
Jim, if we can't stop it, millions of people will die.
Perhaps more, Doctor. If planet annihilation is part of this thing's nature, it might seek them out as instinctively as an amoeba seeks out food. It may not consume only planets, but also stars. We do not know yet whether it has any selective ability, but it could be a threat to every planet in our galaxy.
Bones, I need an expert psychological opinion. Do we dare tell the people on Mantilles, try to save a few who could get away?
How much time do they have?
4 hours, 10 minutes, sir.
It's certain there'd be planet-wide panic.
Blind panic.
On the other hand, notifying them may still save some small fraction of the population, Captain.
Who's the governor of Mantilles, Jim?
Bob Wesley, he left Starfleet for the governorship. He's no hysteric.
Then tell him.
Coming up on the cloud, sir. ETA 5 minutes, 10 seconds.
Thanks, Bones. Lieutenant Uhura, send a priority 1 call to Governor Wesley on Mantilles.
Aye, aye, sir.
Don't they go up to warp 9 at some point in TOS?
Do they?
I don't know. It's a little incongruous because in this episode, or in one of the episodes we're about to talk about, they do talk about how much of a hurry they're in, and then they just say warp 8. Mm-hmm. So it sort of implies that they're going at the maximum. But
I think it was the
They've been doing like 5 at least for 100 years, because that's when the Enterprise.
Yeah, Enterprise.
They didn't get it for like 50 years after Enterprise or something.
The NX-01. No, on Enterprise they got
Enterprise
warp 5.
could do warp 5. And
in fact, it
could go out to Neptune and back.
Above that.
But when Archer was like 12 or something, they wouldn't give him warp 5.
The Vulcans wouldn't give us warp 5.
And it wasn't until
they had to figure it out on their own.
And it wasn't until like 25 years later that they got warp 5. Or
well,
something?
it wasn't just about the warp 5 with Enter.
Yeah, I know. They didn't like the Vulcans.
We've already diverged from our topic of conversation. But just to clarify,
There's hardly any Vulcans.
His main complaint was the Vulcans just weren't helping them at all.
Yeah,
they were giving them like little dribbles and drabbles.
Yeah, but you can still sort of extract some technical lore in that they didn't have warp 5 at that point.
Precisely.
Even though that wasn't the point, you can still say, no, you said that. You said warp 5.
And
no going back. It was just for narrative purposes. No.
Speaking of points,
does anybody know what the hell warp 5 is?
The point of this episode...
It's 5 times the speed of warp.
The point of this episode is to discuss 2 episodes of Star Trek, the animated series. So welcome to the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
Not series as in the moon.
Yeah, what?
Or wait,
Ceres is not the moon.
It's wait, sorry, I got that one.
Ceres is an asteroid.
It's an asteroid.
That's what
maybe a dwarf.
Sorry.
It's the largest. Yeah, it's like a dwarf. It's the largest object in the asteroid.
Right. Well, I know, but moon. I know moon's not an asteroid.
That's no moon.
It's like a planetesimal.
A moon has to be orbiting a planet, presumably.
Right. Okay, fine. I just got the words mixed up. So fucking crucify me.
The semantics in astronomy are complex
attack.
And somewhat arbitrary. So we needn't worry too much about
What's the deal with this Pluto anyways? It is a planet, it's not a planet? You need
Pluto's
some identity.
A fucking planet.
So, again, welcome to the podcast.
So yeah, we did 2 episodes.
You know the one you're listening to because you downloaded it, right?
Yeah.
So yes, we're doing 2. No, don't be mean to the audience.
I'm sorry.
We've talked about this, Dan. Dan loves you guys.
The audience is nice.
Dan is in love with a significant portion of our already hefty audience.
I'm really lonely.
So today, it's my role to keep this on track, and I'm terrible at it. So I'm going to try to be good at that.
It's your role. I guess it is kind of
Well, it's just I have the buttons.
You have the buttons. That is true. You haven't. It is really as simple as that. Defer to the man with the buttons.
I have a knob.
Yeah, you are a knob.
Just because you have a knob doesn't mean you are a knob.
I had a really interesting way to begin this episode, actually.
All right. I hit it.
Too late.
No, I don't remember what it was.
Too late?
And I thought I wrote it down specifically, and I was hoping that it would come back to me. But
So this
Does it
reminds
start
me.
with the word Mantilles?
The other day,
No.
my
Mantilles.
daughter kept
Man-
telling me that she
Mantitties.
had $100, but then she said that she lost it, and I said, "Well, then you don't have it."
yeah.
And she said, "No, I have it, but I just don't know where it is." And I said, "If you don't know where it is, you don't have it."
right.
I will give the same advice to you, Dan. you do not have an interesting way to start this podcast. You have a hint of it in your notes.
snap.
Okay,
dude.
okay. What's the difference then between having $100 and
No,
not
my
knowing
analogy
it
is my analogy doesn't work, and I freely admit that.
Okay. Oh wait. Well, I had.
It's
okay,
not exactly.
I had a way.
Had a way.
I had a way.
Had a way.
Had a way. Had a way. Had a way. We're doing that thing.
Hadaway is a different song.
Oh, it's that band. It's What Is Love?
Yeah, it's what it's like.
That's what wasn't that what I was doing?
Yeah, I think you were. I wasn't. But you were.
Anyway.
you went.
Dan was doing a different song.
So before we go off too long on this tangent, because we do need to get to the episode, right? Because people don't like when you dick around too much.
I think somebody's got to like this.
They can't. Well, no, the people who listen to this show are discerning people.
I hope they.
They like this.
They love
They're
it.
listening to this right now, and they're eating this shit right up.
Eating
They're like,
it.
"This is great."
It's like, what's Dan going to say?
They're like, "These guys are so goofy. They can't keep their shit together."
You eat pieces of shit for breakfast?
Exactly.
We were just talking about golf.
Shooter McGavin.
Shooter. So I had a way to open the show, but I swear I made a note of it, but none of my notes are jumping out at me as like the thing. It's supposed to trigger a response that is not just reading. It's like
Governor Bob Wesley.
It's like the words. I'm not supposed to read.
I'm glad you wrote that down because I forgot to.
I'm not trying to read the words directly as an opener. The words I wrote are supposed to trigger a memory that makes me
like
go
a
off on a
shorthand.
bit. Yeah,
Like a
and
shorthand.
My shorthand sucks because I
So
don't.
what do you know?
What about those blobs,
Can you read the
Bones?
shorthand?
No, because I mixed them in with my regular notes.
I'm not even gonna begin to try to take that apart. So anyway, today we're talking about 2 episodes of
Bob, where's Katie?
Star Trek: The Animated Series, episodes 3 and 4. One of our planets is missing, and we'll talk about that.
Where did it go?
That title in a second, because we're going to start with that episode. So one of our planets is missing. It was episode 3, and then episode 4, the Lorelei signal. So we'll talk about that in the back half
Quite a signal. Too.
of today's show.
One interesting thing that's going on with this episode is that we have 2 more animated series episodes that we have not brought to the audience's ear yet.
Yes,
So-
we have.
No, those were aired.
Yeah,
Yes.
those were aired. You're thinking of the other episode.
The Mirror Universe.
Well,
we
that
didn't-
totally destroys like that whole point I was making.
I thought you were going to be. I thought you were marketing episode 8.
Oh, no.
Episode 8,
in
by
your
the way, of the podcast.
I did the opposite of it because I didn't even know.
Excited. I was like, Dan's doing it.
I did the opposite because I was like, don't even try because we never released it.
No, in episode 8 of the It's Got Star Trek podcast, we talk about.
We didn't talk about Mirror Universe, right?
That was the one that we didn't.
Yeah,
that
but we talk
nobody-
about Beyond the Farthest Star and Yesteryear, which are the first 2 episodes of the animated series. So now we're talking about the next 2. And part of the reason we're doing this is because why the hell not? We can do whatever we want. The other reason is
The animated
because
series is a nice show.
Lower Decks, the new Star Trek animated Star Trek show, is starting up on August 6th, I believe.
And everyone has decided to hate it already.
No, actually, most people like it, but there are a bunch
it's
of haters.
good.
Yeah, anytime you get a new show, I can't get worked up about this anymore. It's like, yeah, all right, new Star Trek show comes on board, and then a whole bunch of people are like, yeah, fuck that, fuck
Well,
that. What are you gonna do?
I was reading a Reddit thread, and it happened to be from a year ago, and they were talking about this, and then they wrote that it was from the head writer of Rick and Morty
Yeah,
is involved.
Mike McMahon.
And one of the person's comment was just oh no. So, it's just like
I saw a comment on Facebook where
Generation
somebody
X.
had shown a screen cap from the Lower Decks preview that just came out within the last few days, and in that sort of preview trailer, there's a scene where one of the characters is essentially naked. Well, he's naked, and they have covered his penis and balls with a black censorship bar. And one of the comments on Facebook was like, "So now they're showing full frontal nudity in a kids show?" But like,
It's not
thankfully,
a kids show.
literally 100 people responded saying, this is not a kid show. I mean, over 100 comments saying you do understand this is not a kid show.
Yeah. So in this Reddit thread, there was a combination of people who are just assuming that everybody agreed that Rick and Morty is a terrible show or something. They were like, "Oh, fucking Rick and Morty. Oh, if you like poop jokes and belching every other minute, if you think that's highbrow humor, you know, it's like,
oh, you didn't watch that show either."
Yeah, and so, but then thankfully there was a few people smattered in there that dropped the comments of like, "Come on, guys.
It's like the guy.
Are we gonna pretend that Rick and Morty is a bad show? Or are we gonna pretend you don't know what the show is like? Like, stop worrying about like gatekeeping that some other fucking writers are gonna ruin your lore or something. You know, it's total bullshit.
It is nonsense, and it's unfortunate, but it's there. What are you gonna do? I guess the general advice is don't feed the trolls because I mean, who cares? I mean, the whole message is who cares? Enjoy Star Trek or whatever you enjoy for however you want to enjoy it. Don't let other people get you down.
They're worried it's going to ruin all of Star Trek.
It's frustrating because you're just like you almost want to engage with those people because you're like, what made you like this, or what's the are you just really? Is this a gag? Do you really think? And I think part of it also is that in the fandom, for lack of a better term, part of the fun is getting together and talking about these things with other people, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? It's really fun to talk about shitty Star Trek episodes or movies. That's cool, right? But I think there's some people who that's not what they're into. They're into something else. Yeah. They're just trying to be agitators or whatever. Right. That's fine.
Because it's totally cool to dislike Lower Decks, after you've seen it, and if you decided you don't like it, that's what having an opinion really is.
Sure. Or if the trailer doesn't do it for you and you're just like, it doesn't look like it's for me. It's like, no worries. I mean, they just today they announced, confirmed the Star Trek Prodigy show, which is going to be on Nickelodeon, and that really is designed to be a kids show. Now, I think there's a strong possibility I will possibly either enjoy it myself,
it's probably good. Yeah.
I'll enjoy it for the watching it with my kids or something like that. Although I'm a bad parent, I'll happily let them watch Lower Decks or whatever.
Your kids are watching Game of Thrones.
Yeah, they didn't watch much Game of Thrones, but they liked like Alien and Jaws and stuff like that.
That's just fun.
It is fun. It builds character. Mm-hmm. But in the end, honestly, it's not a big deal. Nobody has to worry about it. But it is funny that you just have to gird yourself. When Strange New Worlds comes out, it's going to be the same thing, or whatever else comes out. When the new Star Wars comes out, this is part and parcel the unfortunate reality of the modern world, and probably the best thing to deflate some of that is simply to ignore it.
Strange New Worlds is going to have a lot of haters.
Yeah, I mean, because Strange New Worlds will probably give people a lot of what they have wanted that they have perceived to be lacking in some of the modern shows, and then people will never find a new way to complain about it.
Well, so between Voyager and Enterprise, the time period in between those, it was kind of like hungry for more Star Trek, and then of course between
you mean between Enterprise, because Voyager went straight into Enterprise.
Yeah, but there was a lag of like a couple years. Wasn't
No, it went straight into that. Pretty much Voyager stopped. Pretty much.
Maybe I just stopped watching Voyager much.
You might have. I watched it right through to the end.
I think I sort of was I think I was spotty with Voyager. I think I didn't keep up with all the episodes. Yeah. Maybe that was it. Maybe I'd given up. Well, it
might be time for a rewatch.
So between Enterprise and Discovery, it's now thinking of all this Star Trek that I wanted to watch. But then, of course, I get it. Like, they're worried about diluting the brand or whatever. I guess there is something about that is
well, that's a concern
viable.
People have. But my argument against that is it depends. There was a franchise fatigue thing that kicked in around Enterprise, but Enterprise getting canceled after 4 seasons was multifold. The media environment was changing. You had newer, crazy, different concepts like Battlestar Galactica and others kind of coming on board. It was post 9/11, so not to trivialize that. It's just that had an effect on the culture and what people were looking for. Star Trek had been on nonstop.
There was a bunch of Sopranos.
Yeah,
and shit.
Since 1987. And in my view, as much as I really like Enterprise, I'm almost done with my rewatch. I just have a couple episodes to go. I really like Enterprise. It's really some of my favorite Trek I found in Enterprise. But it is a similar concept to Voyager, which is a similar concept to The Next Generation. Deep Space Nine had its own thing going. But people got tired. There's the writers get tired, the production gets tired. I can understand people being like, all right, another show about a spaceship and people flying around in it. If they handle it differently, like they seem to have, or they seem to be doing now, Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, Strange New World, they seem to be purposely going and targeting slightly different audiences, right?
And that's what's pissing people off.
It might be, but people would be pissed off if the opposite was true. If they had like five shows that were like all the same, it's different flavors, and whatever flavor you dig,
you can only please part of the people
or don't dig. If you're only into old school Trek, that's awesome, no worries. But
just keep your mouth shut,
or just don't worry about it. You don't got to worry about it. You don't got to worry about us.
What are you worried about?
Yeah, what are you even worried about?
Don't even worry about it.
I hope I like Lower Decks. It seems it looks like it's going to be pretty cool.
I want to be entertained. I want to like new things. Sometimes I don't.
Better than Upper Deck.
And sometimes things take
bro.
a while to. It could be shit. It could be awesome. It could be kind of cool but a little uneven and might take a year or two to work its kinks out. I mean, that's just how shit works. So I'm not stressed about it because all of this is fucking entertainment, right? So we don't got to worry about that. There's plenty of other like real shit to worry about in the world.
You were totally right. Yeah, I mean, not that I questioned you, but I just looked up the dates and it was July, August. It was like 4 months between Voyager and last Voyager and first Enterprise. I don't know why I thought that was
started in fall.
I don't know,
like September.
Yeah,
and Voyager's 7th season ended in I think May.
I don't know why I thought there was a gap because I did see the last episode of Voyager. Maybe it was just because I decided halfway through that it wasn't something that
maybe
was really sticking to me or something.
Were you time traveling?
Yeah, I did walk in the opposite direction that the Earth rotates.
Isn't that great?
I jumped and I flew around the Earth.
It's great when that happens.
In the opposite direction.
You just jump up in the air and you start going.
Yeah, and
you just go
but it's
around the Earth.
It's got to be in the opposite direction.
In the opposite direction, all Wittershins.
Or I'm not strong enough to turn it on its axis and make it go the other way or whatever.
You gotta work up to that.
Yeah, you gotta work out.
Yeah,
you gotta work. But I don't know what exercise you
go
do
work
to
out,
turn
bro.
the Earth.
But I did.
One of those stretchy.
I did go.
It's probably a lats thing.
I did fly in the opposite.
Triceps.
I did fly in the opposite direction of the rotation of the Earth.
Yeah, that's where it's at.
That might have been.
That could have done it.
I was going on lots of vacations.
That'll do lots of stuff.
All right, so Our Planet is Missing is the first episode. It's the third episode, but it's the first episode we're talking about tonight.
It's 5371.3 is the star date.
And it aired on September 22nd, 1973. For context, for cultural context, for example, we've already talked about the opening theme song. We talked about that in episode 8.
What else happened in 1973?
Well, it was in the middle, the middle of Watergate.
Yeah.
Middle of the whole post-investigation.
Gravity's Rainbow came out in 73.
Gravity Rainbow.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But I think weren't all the episodes directed by Hal Sutherland? I think they were.
Yes, yeah.
And like at the end of the episode, his name is all like super.
And it's the Filmation.
calligraphy
It's
style.
the Filmation crew. The people that later did like all the He-Man stuff. It's the same team. We may have talked about that in the last podcast.
In episode 8, it's a good one. But it started. Okay. This episode starts out, it's really kind of gets into the story fast, and they're talking fast, and everything's happening fast, which is funny because at the end of the episode, everything sort of slows down, which we'll get to. But certainly, at the beginning, we're just like, there's a space cloud. What's going on? They figure out very rapidly that it's eating up planets, and it is going to attack this other planet, and they've got to sort out this problem.
Mantilles.
That's all figured out. Like right away, right at the beginning.
I got some big old mantilles.
Oh, I thought you were gonna have like a cool
always,
trivia fact.
I
or
always
something.
No, I didn't. I just got some. I haven't been working out. I've been getting bigger mantilles.
Well, and
what about those blobs, Bones?
Blobs bones.
The Spock is very logical. This whole episode is like everyone's. I don't know if it's the actors or just kind of not into it or whatever. It kind of works for me, but they're all kind of talking very deliberately. And clearly laying everything out. Like this conversation at the very beginning between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy about whether or not to inform the planet. That's a really interesting conversation. It's a no easy answer kind of conversation.
But the guy taking care of the planet or whatever, I forget who his name was.
Jesse knows his name. The governor.
Oh, Governor Bob Wesley.
Bob Wesley. He's one of those guys
Bob
that has
Bobolina.
a first name for a last name.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, that whole...
Just like Wesley Crusher.
That dude was depressing.
Yeah, it was really depressing. I mean, he was, of course, talking about an entire planet dying. He says 5,000 children out of 86 million people. I mean, that was some pretty heavy shit. I mean, I know we were talking before about how this was not, I mean, this can be enjoyed by all ages, but it was not directed at kids.
It was truly a continuation of Star Trek. I mean, the writers considered it to be the fourth season of Star Trek in a lot of ways, even though it was marketed as a Saturday morning cartoon, I believe.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. We saw it on Nickelodeon in the 80s.
In the 80s.
Watching it is kind of like, this sounds kind of silly, but it's like watching a moving picture book. And I know that videos are moving pictures, but it's like, there's a lot.
It's the old style animation.
There's
limited movement.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in visually for each image. You know,
they recycle a lot of things.
Yeah,
not so much in these two episodes, but if you watch a lot of the other episodes, you can see that. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, you're good. It goes
like when they're running and stuff.
Yeah, like
that's in neither of these episodes.
Yeah, there's a funny like when you see people crews running from a distance. It happened in the one where that we did with Spock on yesteryear.
Yeah,
where you get this view of them running, and they're always a silhouette when you're a far away view watching them run. It's always a silhouette. But so visually,
they have like the chase music.
Yeah, which is there was some crazy action 70s music.
Yeah, that's in the Lorelei signal. They use
Lorelei
that.
signal.
Oh yeah,
but 70s chase.
But even in this one, there's like this subtle
French connection.
When they're in the space scenes with the cloud, they're talking, but then there's this sort of like
yeah.
It's very 70s.
In my notes, I said subtle disco waka wakas in the music bed.
I wrote waka wakas too. Actually. Yeah, waka waka. So it's interesting though. For example, in the other one where they went to that alien, the other episode where they went on that alien
beyond the farthest star.
Thank you. We reviewed both of those.
Or
talked about them anyways. Yeah.
So creepy alien fella.
So even though there's not much movement and there's a lot of recycled things, you get these backdrops that are pretty interesting to look at, and you can take. There's a lot you can take in visually just from
there's a lot of cool visual stuff on the animated show.
Yeah, you can, and from the backdrops mainly, but it's cool mixed with the foreground too. But you can take those in kind of right, and then you can listen to the dialogue. And kind of, you don't have to be watching it the whole time. I try to watch it the whole time, but I noticed if I look away for a minute, I can look back and I found I haven't really missed much.
You still understand.
They haven't moved that much.
Yeah, so it's dialogue heavy in that sense, and I wonder,
still Star Trek.
It's a good observation, like an audio narrative kind of, like if you're listening to an audiobook or something.
Right. So
that's cool.
So I'm wondering I don't know if they did that on purpose or if it's just me noticing it because there's less movement to watch. Maybe I'm just noticing that more. But there is something about, I actually noticed this when I was watching the Napoleon Dynamite animated series. I tried to watch it. Yeah, I'm going to give it another chance. I couldn't get into it because I
forgot about that.
I liked the movie, and I think it was directed by Jared Hess or something who did the movie. So it's like all the same people, but it just felt really forced in this weird way. And I don't know if it's just the nature of when you do, it's an animated show with voiceovers and things like that. If the way it's written and presented, how different is that from a show? But in any case,
Trailer Park Boys, the animated series, was a little disappointing. I thought.
Yeah, so it doesn't directly translate. So, but this show, I find, you can really just listen to the dialogue and then sort of look at the imagery, sort of glance at the imagery here and there. And so you were talking, Patrick, about how they were maybe they were phoning it in, but the dialogue seemed very deliberate. And so it made me sort of think of that, if there's any sort of relation between maybe it's a different way to try to present that sort of over the animated medium. I don't know. There was a lot of interesting kind of science-y,
there were a lot of facts. They were dropping some facts.
Yeah, they
about macrophages and enzymes and
unknown elements from outside the
and
galaxy.
then when is it Lieutenant or Ensign Eric's was on like it's larger than Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus combined, or Jupiter, or whatever.
Oh, are you talking about the forearm guy?
It's bigger than your anus, Dave.
Yeah, and a question I had about him. Okay,
he goes, it's Eric's. He goes, it's immense, twice the diameter of Saturn, Jupiter, and Neptune together. And it was only like, it was like 800,000 kilometers, which didn't sound big, because sometimes they'll talk about entire nebula that goes for light
Sure,
years across
yeah.
and shit like that.
Maybe that's where they were weirded out because this wasn't a nebula. It was
Eric's
Yeah, it was too small.
was that James Doohan? Did he do
800,000 kilometers across and half that in depth. Okay.
I don't know if that was
because Doohan
he did a lot of voices.
He did
right?
a lot of the extra voices on that, along with Majel
Extra.
Barrett.
Yeah, Majel Barrett's all over
and
both of these episodes.
I'm not sure about the Catwoman. She's not on either of these episodes, but was that Nichelle Nichols or was that Majel Barrett?
I honestly don't know. I'd have to look that up.
Because I'm never quite sure, and she was in the other episodes that we watched that we talked about earlier in episode 8. But you usually have the Catwoman or you have Lieutenant Uhura.
Yeah, that's true. They don't always have the same. And then with Eric's, it's
sometimes it's either Eric's or it's Chekhov.
The alien voices almost universally on the animated show are they're all like we are non-humanoid.
Yeah, right.
But then I'm thinking I was wrestling with this thought, right? Which is on the one hand, I'm thinking, okay, that's racist or speciest, whatever the term is, because it's just non-humanoid people are all like
non-humanoid people all
But then I was thinking, well, actually, maybe it's progressive because obviously non-humanoid creatures should, in theory, sound different and they're very alien. But then again, what's the threshold for humanoid? Just because this guy has a ET head that ET stole from him, by the way, because this came first, and 4 arms, is he non-humanoid or is he just
he can push a lot of
humanoid?
buttons.
He's still got a head and legs and shit because he's not a ghost.
Well, I mean,
cloud
is Goro from Mortal Kombat non-humanoid? He's
no. See, Goro, I think to me is straight up humanoid.
Yeah.
But this guy, the difference.
Do you get the feeling like this guy's more spider-like or something in his arms, a torso area?
And then there's that bird guy that
that
one of
bird
those
guy.
episodes. I mean, he's not humanoid
Who was
because
also
he's a
in
bird.
that bird show. Wasn't there some bird superhero bird show too? That was
Harvey Birdman.
Harvey Bird. Well, there was that, but I think it was Super Friends or something. I don't know. It's not important. Sorry.
There was. They also had an Andor at one point in the animated series. There was an Andor.
Andorian?
Yes.
Andorian
what?
Andorian.
An Andorian crew member.
Andorian.
Endor what? They said they pushed it to warp 8. They went to warp 8 and he said push it to the limits. He goes, Mr. Sulu, increase the speed to warp 8, push it to the limit. So that, pretty much says that's their limit, I guess. I don't know.
Somewhat perplexing, but
everybody's got a limit.
It also reminds us that to the limit in the TOS era, in particular, continuity was looser, and they didn't pay quite as much attention to those sort of things. They focused a little bit more on the character and all that. So they said whatever they needed to say for the.
It was the
sake of the
60s.
story.
Everybody was on acid.
Yes,
they forgot about shit.
Yes. Yeah, there was all sorts of stuff going on. Acid, quaaludes, uppers, downers, amyl night. Did we go over this last week?
I think we not last
what
week.
Was that stuff
several times
about
at least.
Benzodrine. They had that benzodrine.
Yeah, benzos.
Benzos. Speaking of drugs, Bones the doctor apparently has expert psychological opinion as well. Part of being a doctor is to
he's
know...
also a psychologist.
He's also a psychologist.
On
Except
a
for that
military
first
vessel
episode.
out in the middle of nowhere.
I guess he's the closest you got. But, well, they didn't have Troy was a counselor, but she wasn't a doctor. She was a doctor of counseling.
Yeah, exactly.
She got
wasn't
to be
a
on the
medical
bridge
doctor.
for some reason.
They also had yeomen as well. So, at least in the original series, they had yeomen, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But it was interesting, the balance between sort of like the biological knowledge of Bones and the mechanical knowledge of Scotty.
Yes. Because
they're both in charge of keeping an organism running, basically. And then they're facing this cloud organism. And so whether you're talking about this cloud, a machine, a human, it's all a working system. So it's interesting when you start sort of combining where the area of engineer and doctor kind of meet up to try to like get this system working together.
Like the graphic they had for the cloud, it looked like either a cross section of a brain that you've seen, or like a diagram of lungs.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Yeah. It was funny. They were saying at the top, that irregular shaped part at the top. I'm like, the whole thing is irregular.
Yeah, right.
I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. Yeah, it's a fucking cloud. Yeah, like that's...
Well, speaking of a cloud, I feel there is a bit of a bait and switch here, because this whole thing is advertised as there's a giant space cloud, and then they get into it, and it's like, that's not a space cloud. It looks cloudy on the outside, but on the inside, it's got all these like horrifying, monstrous digestive system and bits.
That's a good point, because right, you think of this cloud, but where did all that stuff come from? And I guess it's all kind of just floating around in there because there were solid bits in there, you know? There was antimatter, just fucking like
those white macrophage looking things, which I guess those were
macrophage enzymes.
Yeah, I'm gonna call them macrophages because I think that's basically the modern equivalent, in the bloodstream or whatever, the immune system response. But what was funny is that they just looked like crumpled up bits of toilet paper.
Yeah, they did.
And it's this show has a lot of that where it's an incongruity between, as you noted, Dan, some of these really amazing and creative, backdrops or foregrounds or for lack of a better term, set designs. And then the occasional here's a crumpled up piece of paper. And they're just know that it's going to be fucked up if these crumpled up pieces of toilet paper touch you.
Yeah. So I think the macrophages is the crumpled up paper, which I think acted as the teeth. I think that's what the deal was. It breaks it down into particles. And then the antimatter stalactite things were the villi or whatever.
That was in the small intestine. That was when they were like, it's a small intestine, isn't it?
Yes, right. So the macrophage uses the teeth that breaks up you as food and then sends you to the villi, which just annihilates you with antimatter. I thought there was some interesting sort of scientific kind of not pseudoscience, but sort of fictional science. I don't know, just it's not even technobabble because it kind of was interesting what they were saying.
Yeah.
They're talking about
Bones just sort of looks out the window and he was like, "Oh yeah, I know what that is."
Yeah,
that's how organisms work.
Yeah, so they were talking about the villi. It blows up and immediately regenerates. So that's how it breaks things down is by fucking taking antimatter, annihilating with antimatter, and then it grows back. I thought that's a pretty creative thing to come up with for how to break it down. And the whole macrophages, sort of breaking it up before that. What was he said? It was the indicator. Oh, yeah. So he was talking about the antimatter engines, right? So if the antimatter, if the indicator goes below 2 anti-kilos, the engine...
Anti-kilos?
Yeah, anti-kilos. The engines won't regenerate. So that was happening, I guess, when they were trying to get away from the antimatter blow you up things.
I think it was mainly about the shields. They were draining all the power.
Was it draining the shields? Is that they were talking about?
It was draining the shields.
Well, in combination with they were trying to go forward, but
early on, Scotty was like, the shields can't take all this.
Yeah, so it's
screens to maximum, sir.
So
my favorite quote of the whole episode: "Screens to maximum, sir."
Maximum. They've turned the brightness all the way up.
Explain.
So the antimatter then wasn't running the engines; it was running the shields. I guess
it runs everything.
Antimatter runs everything. So basically,
it's like on a
antimatter and matter reaction.
Yes,
right. So the way he seemed to describe it, he was talking about the engines can't regenerate. So basically, the antimatter engines, they regenerate to maintain power, basically, right?
It's like an alternator.
Yes, but it's a little different. Right, I was thinking that too.
It's like recovering energy from your disc brakes.
It's a little different though because...
Well, yes, it's a starship.
Well, That's what I was going for. Because it's a big ship, not a tiny car with the wheels on the road. Because I was saying...
these wheels are in space.
Some
space wheels.
A car is limited by the amount of power it can put out, right? And so I'm sure the Enterprise is limited by power it can put out as well, but it also seems
by physics.
But it also seems to be limited.
Kind of.
Sorta.
It also well, we'll find out when I finish the sentence, right?
If you ever do.
Yeah.
Take your bets, folks.
It's not up to me apparently.
I'm not stopped.
Oh yeah, this girl. So you have the amount of power that something can output, and so the power you have that going on, but also your limitation is apparently you can push the power beyond what the antimatter can regenerate. So your power can go more than what your ship can maintain, but it uses up your antimatter and uses up your reserve. So basically, you can output more power than you can create more. I'm using all stupid words. Power. You can use up more energy than you can regenerate. Right? It's kind of like if you had a plug, like an adapter for your laptop or whatever, and your laptop was using up more power than it could regenerate from the adapter. Right? Usually they try to give you a laptop. I'm looking at a laptop right now. Sorry.
I can confirm Dan is looking at a laptop.
Yeah. So usually devices like that, they give you an adapter and it's capable of taking in as much energy as it consumes, usually more so it can regenerate power. In this case, the Enterprise can use up more energy than it can it can regenerate, which is probably a good thing because you want those things to be highly configurable. I mean, they're always redirecting power from shields to engine systems and stuff. So they want to have max. They want to be able to fuck the thing up. See, when we have these laptops, they don't want us to fuck these things up. So these are engineers, and they want to have the ability to fuck these things up.
In a military situation, you want to be able to have that. I think the closest. I mean, it's a tricky analogy. I think the closest analogy is if you had like a solar charger for your cell phone, and you could use your cell phone off of the solar charge, during the day. However, if you all of a sudden decided, I got to watch like a YouTube video while downloading some torrents on my phone, then you're going to use up the battery faster than the solar power can regenerate. This is an imperfect analogy, but I think about as close as we can.
I think that's pretty. I think
they were just turning it. They were turning it to 11. They were turning those motherfucking engines to 11.
And with an alternator, you can't really. It doesn't really work like that.
And I think one area that sometimes gets sacrificed, understandably, on the animated series is that's not explained. And in fact, when you go in the engine room, you've been told by Scotty and Kirk, you've seen this conversation, you know what the plan is, and then you see all these tubes with lightning going through them. It's not clear. Does the lightning mean it's running out of power, or is using it really fast, or is it being hit by lightning by the cloud
blowing up? Right.
No idea. And I think that's partly a result of the shorter running time of these episodes. I believe that at least in some cases, I think these are leftover scripts, or at least scripts that were in development for the regular live action show. And beyond that, I think those people are thinking in those terms, the writers. So you can basically, watching these, you can see where stuff has been cut out. And I don't mean edited out. I mean just not written in the first place or removed from the script, especially for, again, in this episode, at the beginning of the episode, they're just like, boom, cloud, boom, 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 boom. A normal episode of TOS would have eased you into it, had some casual conversation to set the mood, and then all of a sudden, they'd be like, oh, there's something on the screen, and then they'd have a discussion about it. They kind of rushed through that, and I think it's also some of these technological explanations that normally we might get a little bit more context around. They kind of just are like, we've just got to end the episode.
Right. But I'm still glad they left that part in, because it's still like the whole
cool.
the antimatter villi blowing up and then regenerate, and then the antimatter engine, all that stuff. It's still cool and creative and interesting. It's just right. It kind of makes me want a little more of it. Right. I'm still glad it's in there because it's neat.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of thing that for that era would have been difficult for them to put onto screen. So it benefited from being in the animated series in that sense. But you can tell they had these big giant stories they were trying to tell, and sometimes you can tell that they had to squeeze them in there a little bit. I don't think it detracts from it. You do notice
No, I don't think
you
so.
do notice it, though.
Yeah, I don't think it detracts. Yeah, what you said. Scotty was pretty confident about his fucked up plan to play with antimatter, though.
Yeah, he was like,
really
he
no
was just,
room
he
for
was like,
error.
He was just like, yeah, we'll just use a tractor beam to cut it off for some reason.
It's like, carry it around.
Yeah, I'll make a force field.
It'll work.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, we all die, but I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. I mean, which is a fairly good attitude to have, probably.
Yeah.
If you're in this type of situation, I guess. It's like when you read interviews or see interviews with the NASA flight directors, and people invariably ask them, how do you stay so calm? Or what was the time that people freaked out the most during a space flight? And the guy is going to be like, we don't. Like, our main job requirement is that we do not freak out.
Right.
When shit is going
They learn
terrible.
about all sorts of all this other stuff you can do. Okay, what happens when this happens? Well, we do this and we do this. And what if that fails? And we do this instead. And it's it's all about everything you can do.
They got it.
Yeah.
They can figure it out.
I mean, and that's a good point.
So you don't have time to lose your shit.
It's a good way of doing things in general, where it's you don't have to be yelled at and demeaned and made to feel like shit if maybe something you calculated didn't work out perfectly. Yeah, you might be responsible for everyone's death, but there's no reason at that point in time to start making you feel like shit about it, because that's not going to help prevent people from dying.
If we don't self-destruct now, all those people will die.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How is that going to work out? Because they seem to imply, they said that the computer was going to take control of the ship, but wouldn't that imply that they were going to go, to escape pods or something? But they fucking kept
They were going to turn the ship into a missile.
Yeah, they were going to turn the ship into a missile.
It was self-destruct. They were mixing a bunch of metaphors.
Yeah. But they were saying the computer will take control. To me, when they say computer will take control, that implies that it's going to allow them to leave the ship and run away while the ship blows up. But
Maybe.
But if you at the last few seconds, they left that down to the last seconds, past zero. So at what point were they going to have time to get in escape pods and run away?
Well, let's back up for a second because I kind of want to go through that thought process that they had because I thought it was very interesting. And again, a really good example of the cool types of things that conversations that would come up on these older style treks that we maybe don't see quite as much or quite as overtly in more modern versions. But in TOS and the animated series, they were putting them out there front and center. And the initial thing was that when Kirk figures out that this thing has a brain and he says, okay, well, now let's figure out let's kill it. Mm-hmm. And he says that. Of course, there's an immediate, but wait, there's rules against, killing something that's a thinking creature. And Kirk's logic, his argument is we know there are these 82 million people on the planet. We don't know if this thing is intelligent yet or not. It may be, there are some indications that it may be, but we don't know 100%. Right? Mm-hmm. So, one argument is that Kirk is absolutely right. It's like if you don't have enough data, then make the decision that's going to ensure that you save the most lives. But then he quotes himself, and I believe this was from A Taste of Armageddon because he's actually referring to Kirk is quoting his own line from an actual TOS episode where he says, we're human beings with the blood of 1,000,000 savage years on our hands, but we can stop it. We can admit that we're killers, but we're not going to kill today. That's all it takes, knowing that we won't kill today. He paraphrases that quote, and I think in an effort to demonstrate that there was a little bit of angst from Kirk's perspective, he's thinking, I've got to do this, but I'm going to explain to you why I feel like I'm also feel bad because I'm going against my own philosophy about we will not kill today. So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting callback, animated series callback to TOS and a little bit of that moral debate. Again, here, I think it's compressed a little because of time. They kind of work through this fairly swiftly because very soon after that is when Spock comes up and says, okay, well, if you want to do that, I've run the numbers and it means we're going to have to blow our asses up. So are you for real? Like, if you're for real, just know that being for real means that we're going to blow our asses up. And Kirk is basically says, yeah, I'm for real. Right. So let's proceed.
Right. So do you think they were, I mean, I guess it wasn't clear then though, like.
It was not clear.
If they were going to be getting off the ship or not. That was the thing, is like, it's a big difference, of course, when you say we're going to blow up or is the ship going to blow up and we're going to get away.
Yeah. To me, it was not 100% clear.
No.
Yeah. And I guess, Kirk kind of pushed it at the end, or Spock and Kirk, Kirk and Spock pushed it because they believed that they had that alien.
Well, and then Kirk comes up with the idea. He says, Spock, can you try doing a Vulcan mind touch?
Yeah.
And then, of course, Spock, being the semantic person he is like, well, no, because I couldn't be in contact. I could try to reach out with my mind, though.
So logical.
And Kirk, the look in Kirk's eye was, you know what I meant. You know what I meant. You just wasted 10 seconds with your semantic, pedantic explanation.
Spock's always pronouncing words funny. I talked about this before, but Sensor. That's what I have written down here. Sensors. Sensors. There's another one. There's a bunch of stuff he says goes, all funny. Instead of spherical, he says spherical.
Yeah.
Spherical.
These are all acceptable pronunciations. However, somewhat unusual.
Right. So, I mean, I'm just thinking
it's almost like he's intentionally trying to make it a little bit funny.
Yeah, he's doing it on purpose. He's doing it on purpose.
The alien was a child, I guess.
The cloud alien?
Yeah, I wasn't clear.
That was Majel Barrett.
It was Majel Barrett. And I wasn't clear if the goal was to actually make you think.
It seemed like it was a young.
Yeah, to make you think. And that was the impression I was getting, is that in addition to being unintentionally, not meaning to kill people, it also seemed that its understanding was fairly sort of quote unquote childish.
Explain.
If you're going by the, truth, what you, the choice of language, the cadence and all that.
Yeah.
And of course, Spock was talking to it like a child, or like he was talking to a dog or something.
Well, it was.
We'll return to origin place.
See, that's the thing that's not. It's confusing because it's not childlike to say origin place.
Yeah, it treats. So basically, it just didn't perceive us, is what I was getting the impression in that, because it sort of looks at us like bugs that it can't really perceive, right?
Yeah.
And that's the impression that I got, is it just didn't even really know we were there. But then I don't know how, well, because Spock is magical. I don't know. That's the impression I got, is it just didn't know that they're there. And then we sort of treated it like it was some kind of nonsense, some kind of cloud nonsense, right? And it wasn't until the Enterprise got closer that they discovered, whoa, there's this crazy system going on. Oh, it changed directions. That's kind of interesting. They also made the differentiated between, did it change directions due to intelligence, or was it just hungry and it sensed it,
Hungry.
Because its origin place, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a bummer, actually, because when it told him to go back to its origin place, that thing kind of seemed a little like, oh man, it's a long way away. And you got to wonder, why did it leave its origin place? Is it just checking out the universe, or
maybe it was beaten by its father?
Yeah,
It could have been suffering from abuse. I only mean that half jokingly. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, right. And so it's not that it ran out of food necessarily, or that there was a war, because it was just like, okay, well, I'll just go back home. It's like, well, if it was that simple, why'd you come out here to begin with? But we established it was an intelligent sort of creature. But the sort of fact that it didn't perceive us and we didn't perceive it, like it just didn't know what we were about, and we just thought it was a dumb cloud.
It's like, what's your deal, bros?
It's sort of it brings up the story of how problems come from lack of communication. Just an inability to communicate with one another. That's a great sort of message to put across.
And this is something that's happened repeatedly. I mean, it happens a lot in TAS. It's a Miyazaki style storytelling too, where ultimately any perceived antagonists, they're not actually antagonists. It's either a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, or just not having enough facts on one or both sides. And
I like the idea of encouraging people to, before you just start blowing shit up, why don't you just at least sit down and have a conversation? Have some tea or something,
And they do, and that's what's cool, that they do that. It's not, Kirk isn't like, hey, let's fucking destroy this thing. Kirk's
more worried,
very reluctant, and it's just like, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. He didn't want to do it, but he didn't know if he was going to be able to get to the point where he could communicate.
See, if Kirk was a shittier person, if he was a person prone to, say, confirmation bias, for example, when he decided, we don't know that this thing is smart, we know that there's 82 million people that are going to die, we have no choice but to kill this thing. He could have used his power as captain to simply not learn that the thing was intelligent, right? He went out of his way to learn more about it, and changed his mind when new facts came. Because McCoy was right there in his ear saying, okay, I don't care that this thing is talking. If we're going to blow this thing up, we got to do it now.
Yeah.
And Kirk was saying, no, now the things have changed. Now we know this thing has an intelligence. If it has an intelligence, the correct thing to do is to try to communicate with it. Especially when it seemed Spock figured out fairly quickly that its intentions did not appear to be malicious. It was just a whale eating krill, for all its concern, right?
So the universal translator, that's always a point of confusion. I know it's a narrative device, right? Well, not a narrative device, really. It just allows anything to happen.
Yeah.
It allows narration to
It's a plot
happen.
facilitator.
Mostly in the TOS.
Yeah, and I always was wondering.
It's in TNG. It's just sort of built into the system.
Yeah, yes. I was always wondering. It's like, is this something that got trained on different languages, or can it just magically translate everything it hears? Because I would assume it would have to get trained on a language somehow, or at least learn sort of patterns. It would take a minute for it to figure out.
In the lore of Star Trek, they go a few different directions, but fundamentally, when you go back to Enterprise, and then you've got Discovery, and then in the future, as Jesse noted, in the future, it's algorithms that can very rapidly figure out the language, which is why they can go to strange planets where they've never been to before. And the universal translator works in most cases. It only didn't for Darmok and Jalad.
Yeah. And Enterprise actually touches on that a bit with Hoshi. Yeah. Right. Because
Hoshi has to do work to make it work.
Yeah, right, exactly. And she had to do work with that device, but she was using that device as a tool to help her make the calculations she needed, and she had to sort of figure out on the fly based upon, certain, sounds and actions and whatever, patterns and things, what that was putting together. So it's not like they had to like brute force it. They had all the way, you know.
They had some help, and then the human help, and then eventually I guess they did not need the human help.
Yeah, but they picked up on this thing pretty quickly, you know. I don't know. I don't know if I would. I don't know which I think would come first, like a true replicator, like something that can replicate food, or the ability to translate a space alien cloud immediately. I don't know. That seems pretty difficult.
Bleep blorps, bleep blorps.
Without some kind of training model, system in place. If it was based upon something, if it was based upon this sort of pattern recognition instead of just it's all pattern recognition. It's all pattern recognition.
But you need data. The thing, obviously, the more you hear, and that's the trick they pull a couple times, where it's like keep talking. The universal translator's figuring it out. You gotta keep talking.
They just picked up on this space cloud a little. It was a little. I don't know. It seemed like a little.
It's a little bit
quick.
swift.
It was a little bit swift. Obviously, you always need data, but Anyways, they can't. Gotta have data. But Spock's talking to him. He kept telling it to listen to him.
Bleep blorps.
He was all like, listen to me. Listen to me.
Well, this is
you are not alone here. There's someone else. Listen to me.
This scene is where it's slowed down, and they sacrificed other parts of the episode to make them a little rushed, to give this scene time to sit and raise the tension. And Spock is speaking slowly to this child brain cloud creature, which was cool. I mean, it was the back half of this episode is interesting. It's wild. I mean, it's a wild sort of with Spock with his arms in the air.
His pose is awesome. That he was just sitting with his arms in the air the whole time. Like, why are you doing that, man?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. But
it was really like just. It was like really brazen. I guess is that the right word? That the writers would, the animators, writers, whatever, director would go with that. Just have him sit with his arms sort of stretched out,
almost
like that,
almost like a preacher, preaching to his flock.
Yeah, it was just kind of funny, right? But you are not alone here. There's someone else. Listen to me. Listen to me. Kept saying, listen to me.
The episode ends, as we said, they say they have the conversation, and then eventually they convince the cloud to go away, and then that's it. That's bam.
The wonders of the universe.
I was going to comment, did Spock just with that sort of pseudo semi mind meld? I guess he got all sorts of cool information downloaded into his brain, which is kind of neat.
He saw some awesome shit. He should write a paper. I mean, how many of their adventures become awesome papers? You'd hope a lot of them.
The scientific journals are loaded with them.
Yeah. I am small. Some things I perceive too small. Not alive beings. Listen to me. I'm going to come into your thoughts. Said, listen to me again.
Necessary.
All right, so why don't we move along to the?
That was a heavy that was a heavy moment for Nimoy, though, to be able to do that. That was pretty intense. That was
and I think he did a good job. I mean, I talked before about the quote unquote, sort of phoning in the performances. I don't think they're always doing that. Sometimes they are, and sometimes different actors in different days or whatever. You can tell, whatever. But it all comes together. It works.
Never
well.
Nimoy.
Yeah,
never Nimoy.
All right, but we'll move along to the Lorelei signal, which is episode 4.
Before I forget, and this has nothing specific with either episode, but these I was looking at the star dates, and this applies to this because they gave star dates a lot in this one, and they seem to follow. But Beyond the Farthest Star, which was the first one, was 5221.3. Yesteryear was the next one, which is 5373.4. Makes sense. 5221 is less than 53. Yeah. This one was 5371. Episode 3 took place before. And the same goes with Lorelei signal was 5483.7. Then there was the More Tribbles, More Troubles, which is the next one after that. This was 5483. The next one is 5392. And then after that, the Survivor is 5143.3.
Yeah, right.
It's like, what kind of fucking order? And they give order in the Lorelei signal because at first it's 5483.7. Then Scotty goes on the line and says 5483.8, and then Kirk goes 5483.9. So they were going up by 1 decimal within this episode each time. So that was a definite order going on there. So it's not like it's not just this sort of circuitous thing. This is a linear, or sort of, it's a forward moving, date system, you know? It's not like it just jumps around. So it's weird that they would release the episodes in different order than when they actually happened in universe.
Is Hal Sutherland, he's probably not alive anymore, because otherwise we could go petition. We could go, picket
Petition.
at his house.
Picket. I'm before it.
Just stand outside his house.
Get your shit straight, man.
It's like, what the fuck's up with these star dates?
Hal Sutherland.
Hey, star dates. Hey, why don't you keep your star dates in order, man?
Stars don't make any sense. What's with the decimal?
What's going on? It's up and down, backwards and forwards. Are we time traveling or what? What's going on here? You film these out of order? It's a cartoon. It doesn't make any sense.
I don't want your star date.
So in the opening shot to the Lorelei signal, we have this cool shot from behind the Enterprise, it's kind of flying along, and it twitches. There's a moment where the Enterprise just goes, just for a second. And I saw it the first time, but I dismissed it, and I just thought, it's sleepy eyeballs or whatever. And then I watched it a second time. I was like, no, there it is. It twitched, and it twitches in a weird way that clearly most people didn't notice or get bothered by, but
now I'm going to have to watch that.
If you take a look, it's right at the beginning, like right after the opening credits. 27.346 star years. Every 27.346 star years in this episode, they reveal that in this particular area of space, every 26.346 star years, a ship disappears, and they don't know why. So their natural solution is to have another ship go to that exact spot at the exact time and just wait.
Right, yeah, right.
I mean, I understand. I'm like, yeah, you're sending Kirk and, blah, blah. But I'm not clear if that's, maybe the plan should be to see what happens if you don't send any ships that way.
Right. There had to have been more thought that you could have put into that decision in such an exact amount of time too. I mean, these are still people we're talking about, they're not robots that have to go on I know that they have to re-up every once in a while, but when you re-up, it's like, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yes. It's an intriguing time frame and they don't explain it. It's a little frustrating that they don't explain it, because there's a couple things in this episode where you're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And you're like, oh, wait, what? Where did that come from? This was the first one. So anyway, they arrive there. The time happens, it gets to that time has passed, and then they get a signal from the Taurian system, I think it was. Taurian system.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Wikipedia real quick says Lorelei is a rock in the Rhine River, the subject of numerous legends, poems, and songs. So
yeah.
It's also somewhere in Germany, I think.
The Rhine.
The Rhine.
Or is that the same thing they're talking about?
The Rhine.
Probably, yeah.
Well, it shows what I know. Anyway.
The Rhine in the Rhine falls mostly on the Plain.
Ah!
I think Dan liked that one.
I did, kind of.
Okay. They receive this signal, and the men immediately start acting weird. And Uhura sees it right away. Yep. She's like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, because they said they were being drawn to it. I can't remember the wording they used, but she's like,
she says it sounds more like music.
Yeah.
So it's like sirens.
Sirens. And what I thought was interesting was both times I watched it, when she made that statement, Kirk and Spock and everybody, they were, you had to look really closely to see them acting weird. They weren't acting full on weird yet.
You could tell. So when I saw when they, you're right, they didn't. I think they did a pretty good job of that, because when they panned the shot past Eric's the first time in there, he had this sort of like resting, sort of dumb face where he had this sort of like elated, silly kind of smile. And I was wondering, it's like, maybe that's just like the animation, that's how they just leave, because sometimes characters have weird faces.
Sulu had a weird smile too.
Yeah. So I just sort of wrote it off as like, oh, that's just like sort of their animation. Because if you look at the overhead shot, there was one of the episodes, I can't remember which, it was an overhead shot of the bridge, and Uhura was like splayed out in some weird position, and everyone had all this weird shit going on, but that was just kind of
animation artifact.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was just kind of like how they did it. And that's what I thought it was, is just that, but it could have just been a subtle sort of, reference to the fact that, they were all getting all, attracted to the place.
Mr. Crinkles.
Sorry.
The Spock says it was interesting to see
this
how
week you're Mr. Crinkles.
It was interesting to see how
it's true.
They had different, custom sort of not only custom hallucinations. We'll get to that in a second, but they had the custom music because, as you noted, Uhura was just saying like, yeah, it sounds like music, but Spock was saying no, this is specifically sounds like
a Vulcan mating
drum.
Yeah.
I am experiencing audio-visual suggestion, Captain. Captain Kirk says dimensional visions.
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what he said. He's dimensional visions. Yes, yeah, right, exactly. That's what it was. I was trying to remember. He says dimensional visions, and he's like, any idea what's causing them? Spock goes, logically, we must assume they are created by the probe, and that's when Uhura goes, sir, what visions? We don't see anything.
Yeah.
That's when she.
Yeah,
I think
right.
that's when she. That was the first or second. Now I'm looking at it because there's some more Uhura stuff earlier. Anyways, you can go on with what you were.
Well, and we're seeing they start showing us, the audience, the hallucinations, which are funny because they're just sort of bland, generic women hallucinations. But Spock actually sees somebody, hitting the drum. My favorite is when Kirk, they're both having. This is another example where they're just like in Wink of an Eye, where in that case it was Kirk and McCoy, but they perceive that they're hallucinating, and they just simply state, "Yeah, I'm experiencing hallucinations. Right. This is wild. What are your hallucinations like?" And Kirk puts his hand in front of his eyes while talking about like, "Oh yeah, this is interesting. We're having hallucinations." And it's like whoever wrote or storyboarded this episode did a bunch of psychedelics, because that's like the whole like, "Oh my god, if I put my hand in front of my eyes, I'm still seeing some crazy shit." That's what Kirk was doing. You've never seen Kirk do anything like that before. Just be like, "I'm just gonna wave my hand in front of my eyeballs."
Yeah. So you were right, or before, about the first thing Uhura said is first she goes something about yellow alert, and then she goes, I'm getting a subspace signal. And then she's like, actually, it's more like music. Spock says, it does resemble a summons. That's one of the things.
Yeah,
it resembles a summons. And she goes, I find no resemblance to a summons,
Right.
Captain. And then
Which is
they're
a
talking
weird
about
way to say it.
Yeah, it was a weird way to say it. And then, yeah, she's like,
I'm guessing the implication is Uhura was just thinking, "Yeah, I'm just hearing some music. We've tuned into a radio station."
yeah.
And everyone else is like, "No,
Yeah.
they're calling us."
Yeah, and right after she says that, she goes, I want you to observe the men here. It seems to start when we picked up that signal. It's gotten worse. And then Spock talks about the drum, the Vulcan marriage drum and stuff like that. So Uhura picked up on that like super quick.
And then
She talks about the visions.
And then Uhura with Chapel, she's pointing out, she's like, "Yeah, these reading whatever Spock said, the sensor reading said that it's wrong. I found at least 3 errors." It was a little unclear to me what she was implying.
Yeah,
I'm guessing after the second watch, my guess is the implication is that Spock is distracted and making mistakes, and that's why. That's an indicator that there's a problem, because Spock shouldn't be making mistakes, because it seemed to be centered on Spock. I didn't get the impression that they were implying that Spock was somehow lying or being manipulated with his brain quite yet. I don't know. It's a little confusing.
Yeah, I was actually read over that spot several times trying to figure out what exactly they were referring to, because that was a confusing part. Scott's talking about the readings are sparse and concentrated, and then Uhura says they're off. It doesn't really make sense. What happens after that, though, that's is kind of interesting, is when they get to the planet, first of all, Kirk's like, fantastic architecture. It's like he's in love with everything about this place.
Yeah.
Only an incredibly advanced race could have, And then Carver...
It's a sex planet.
It's a sex planet. It's a deadly sex planet. Carver asks, he's like, you want me to do those routine readings, sir? Basically, they're normal shit that they're supposed to do. And Kirk goes, no, I don't think so, Carver. Spock will do it. So that's pretty soon after Uhura is talking about the readings are off, which still doesn't explain what she meant, but like that's sort of the point. I guess you're supposed to realize that, these guys are totally abandoning their duties, basically.
Yeah, some weird's going on.
Yeah.
They're definitely acting in a weird way, and they act more weird in a bit.
Yeah.
So they get down to the planet. I think the first thing to mention is again, the animation's great, and what's particular. I mean, not great in the sense that it's smooth and flowing and all that. It's not. We've already talked about that. This is Funimation. It's kind of stilted in some ways, but they use that to their advantage. And in this case, they have that, as we talked about earlier, that whole silhouette run thing.
Yeah.
But it's juxtaposed with both foreground and background being super brightly colored and intricate.
Yeah.
So it makes for this awesome effect of these silhouettes running in between these super colorful mountains and buildings and stuff. It was pretty neat.
With awesome 70s style chase music.
Yeah.
No, the chase music's great. I mean, I want to just download this soundtrack or find it. It's like intense. It's like there would be some good driving music. If you ever want to drive someplace quickly,
Yeah.
pop on that.
Really fucking
Yeah,
fast.
pop on that TAS chase music.
Your ass is going to get there real fucking quick.
Do you think that was like public domain stuff they grabbed from somewhere? I mean, they did record.
No, they had a composer.
They had. So I know for the opening has a different song. Do you think that had to do with who owned the rights, or do you think they just decided to make?
I think they wanted a different song because they jazzed it up 70s style. I think it might be a little. It might be a little shorter.
It's like an inversion of the melody. It all goes down instead of up.
Yeah, and and that's what I was wondering, because a lot of times they'll like when a show is parodying something and they'll play the song, but the song will be inverted, but you know that they're parodying that one, like it's Mario Brothers or something like that.
Right.
They also redid the narration for the opening too.
Yes.
In that one, but in any case, yeah. So I was wondering, because I was wondering, I hope they recorded something special, something separate for that chase music, because it was.
Yeah, no,
cool.
I think they absolutely did. Now I think they reused the music a lot. I think they didn't record quite as much music as they did, when they were doing the full live action show. But definitely some really cool new tracks that are Star Trek tracks, but with that 1973 vibe going on.
Fresh tracks. This is another episode where Spock says some word strangely. He goes psychokinesis.
Yeah, that was weird. Now, I was wondering if that's Spock pronouncing it weird, or if just in the culture we hadn't quite figured out psychokinesis as a word, like
meta.
Because the 70s was when a lot of these sort of psychic experiments and things, when people were taking it somewhat seriously before they rapidly figured out it was a bunch of nonsense. But there was a period, of course, where all sorts of perfectly reasonable, sensible people were looking into it and testing it out.
Isn't that what
coming up with these terms?
That Men Who Stare at Goats movie with whatever.
And MK Ultra and all that other good, fun, crazy stuff that went on. Like the actual conspiracies. Like there's the fake, silly conspiracies, and then there's the actual conspiracies where they did some crazy, fucked up shit.
So they get down to this planet and there's some.
It's a room full of blonde white ladies.
Yeah. There's one of them all spinning crystals on both hands. It's the entertainment for the evening. She's spinning these giant crystals, and they're all just like watching it.
And when they're talking about, they're getting acquainted, and the men don't realize there's an issue yet. Although the music realizes there's an issue because the music's getting all sinister and shit. But but there's that line where they're talking about they're like, hello, where are these people? Hello, humans, or whatever. And McCoy is like, first time I ever admired a body function.
Yeah.
Which A, I don't believe.
Yeah, I know. Right?
And B, I was a little bit titillated by it.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Because McCoy is a sexy guy.
Yeah.
As Dax once said, he had very nimble hands.
Well, with the way he said it, it made me think of like farts or something, because it was titillating, but at the same time, it was like, what do you never got turned on by a body function? So I was like, maybe he's referring to farts because he's a doctor and he sees a lot of farts.
First of all, totally cool. If that's what you're into, if you're into farting, that's awesome. If that gets you sexually excited.
Awesome.
It's awesome. No. Okay, Jesse made a fart sound, and Dan thought that his laptop was on fire.
I thought someone's cell phone. Remember, when cell phones ring, sometimes it would like fuck with your radio AM station.
Back in the olden days.
Yeah, right. They don't do that anymore.
No, but it would be funny if McCoy was into that kind of thing, because when he hallucinates, he hallucinates magnolias, like magnolias blooming, because he's a Southern gentleman. And the juxtaposition between the sweet floral odor of a magnolia with farts would make for an interesting kink in the case of one Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy.
I like McCoy asks him, he goes, where are the men? And they go, they occupy another compound. And Kirk's like, that makes sense.
Yeah, I know it doesn't.
That makes no sense. That's a red flag.
Okay, what are you talking about, Kirk?
Look out. Yeah.
That is a sign Kirk is under the influence of some sort of brainwave thing, because that was so ridiculous. It's like, where are all the other men? Oh, they're somewhere else.
Not even a question.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's what I would do, too. Yeah.
Whatever you say,
There was some hint, though, given that that there's these humanistic qualities to them, that they're not these evil motherfuckers, that they were they wanted to do good, because she had a tear roll down her eye.
Now, quick question: did she mention her name? I didn't catch the name.
I think it was Thela.
Was it Thela? Something like that. I listened for it both times and missed it both times. I wasn't sure if they ever mentioned the name, but yeah, she does.
It says she goes, I am Thela, the head female. Welcome, James Kirk, Dr.
Yeah.
McCoy, Mr. Spock. Welcome. The head female.
The head female.
So yeah, the head female. That's also, a red flag is, the men are in the other compound and then you've got the head female. I mean, if it's normal for them, that's great, but it seems like something you'd like to be curious about to say, that's a little different than how we do things.
It's tricky because you're right. And then simultaneously, the crew that's serving as the audience surrogate is actually disconnected from the audience in this sense because they are under the influence of these aliens. Yeah. They're not hearing the sinister music that we are.
That's true.
So
that's a good, excellent point about seeing the horror movie where the wolf is going to eat the man or the woman, and we know that the dark corridor is scary because there's music playing that's scary. Plus, it's like, why else would they just show someone walking around some random ass corridor unless?
Yeah. And they're all like whistling.
Eating. Yeah, right.
They're like, oh, did I hear something?
And
No, I didn't. I guess not. I'm just going to keep walking down this.
And we already know
light corridor
from history that those types of people get ate. So
yep.
Yeah. So you're right. You're right. We had some advantages that the crew didn't have.
Kirk had an advantage in that he got the fancy bed. Remember when Spock and McCoy go looking for Kirk and they find him? He's all sleeping in that fancy 4-poster bed. And again, here, I'm not clear on what they were trying to say because the head female explained it, basically later explains, they like suck their energy out. And then there's this implication that it's somehow related to those headbands. But then why is Kirk in a fancy bed? Are they date raping these people?
Yeah.
Is that part of the process? I don't know if that's meant to be implied. I'm of course halfway joking, but I'm also wondering because the men pass out. Next thing we know, they wake up and they're all like, "What the fuck is happening?"
They were all worn out after.
They were all like withered and worn out, sucked dry. And then they go to Kirk. Kirk has got this fancy bed because I guess he's the captain and the head female wanted to be with the head male. Well, why would he need to be in a bed just to have his energy sucked out of his brain?
It seems like, kind of going back to what you were saying, is
didn't come out of his brain.
These episodes maybe were written in sort of a skeletal form, and they were like, okay, well, in this beat here, this will have happened, and we'll connect the dots here. There's a reason Kirk's in this bed and there. We'll connect the dots. Oh, the Uhura is saying that she was reading 3 readings were off, and why are the readings off? When did Spock ever say there was something different than that? It's like kind of like, oh, well, we put that there to indicate that, these guys aren't reading their readings right, but we didn't actually just, tell the audience what it is, that sort of got misread. So yeah, I think it's, and I'm trying to remember what point you made that about with the last episode, but I think it was some of the, sort of the, not technobabble so much as just sort of explanations, quote unquote scientific explanations that
go by the wayside.
Yeah, sort of go by the wayside. And this was like, sort of like forgetting to connect story beats or something, because there were some things going on. It's like, how did we get from A to B here,
or just falling in love with the imagery? Because one thing I was thinking about, I was really thinking about this bed situation for a while, because this is it's not just a bed, it's a really prominent bed on a pyramid of steps, and it's a giant 4-poster bed. It looks amazing. And when you listen to the audio, he didn't need to be in a bed. Like, the audio does not require Kirk to be found in a bed and wake up. They don't mention the bed or anything. McCoy doesn't say, "Look, he's in that bed," or So it almost could have been that they have the script, they record the audio, and then when it came to storyboarding the animations, they were like, "Fuck it, that looks cool. Let's make some shit look cool," and it did look cool. So like, they win on that point, but it introduces these questions, and I wish I knew more about the production background to know where exactly some of those inconsistencies or sort of out of non sequitur things, like the 4-poster giant bed on a pyramid, where those came from, or if they were intended to mean something, or if they just were there as a design element.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know. We won't know.
There's
no way to know.
No.
Computer on. Working. South Park was directly lifting from. Did the computer ever talk like that on the original series?
Yes,
it did.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember. Yeah.
Well, in this one, it's Nichelle Nichols is the voice. It's not. It doesn't sound like.
Yeah, you're right. It usually doesn't sound like Major Bear.
It sounds like,
even though Major Bear's like all over these things.
Yeah.
You're right. Wink of an eye actually had that. I'm pretty sure the computer, when they were asking
processing.
Yeah, right.
And it has the typing sounds going.
Yeah.
That's a computer thinking.
Yeah, one of my cats did not like that sound, and she was like looking around, and like she would get up and like run away.
All I know is if my computer makes that sound when it's thinking, it's a problem.
Yes.
Yeah. So
this is a 60-year-old computer.
So if you ever watch the South Park episode where there's a computer going working, they're directly referencing that.
So now we get into the debate about whether or not this episode is a feminist episode. I think it's a tricky debate. And who better than to have this debate than three gnarly white dudes?
Uhura gets to take control of the Enterprise.
Yes, she does. And
so one of the only episodes that I can remember.
Uhura, not only does she take control, she kicks ass. Yeah. And she's and it's none of this. It's not like
Scotty's pretty useless at this point.
Scotty,
he's sitting back singing some kind of Welsh.
What was awesome is that the sort of establishing shot of the Enterprise.
Establishing.
Yeah, you just hear him singing. You're like, okay, what's going on? That's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, and then you're even more weirded out because he's sitting in the captain's chair with this drunk look on his face. But the world's just like, what the fuck, man?
The Enterprise just sort of
take this guy out,
slowly hoving into view.
Yeah,
while he's singing this. I hope it's a Scottish song.
It's a Welsh song. Actually.
Oh, it's a Welsh song. Okay, that's all right. I was very concerned. I didn't listen closely enough. I was very concerned that he was singing like an Irish song, and I was like, that would be.
It's even weirder.
Incongruous.
It's a Welsh song.
Well,
I mean, the Welsh song is weird enough for a Scotsman to sing, but
but that's
he's actually Canadian.
Yes,
that's when Uhura takes control like right away. But I mean, in that sense, it is. But the story is basically about women who are torturing men in order to maintain their youth and beauty, right? This torture, it comes in the form
Isn't that like real life?
This torture comes in the form of sexual manipulation. They don't say as much. They call it emotional, but it's
it's sexual manipulation.
And what it does is this manipulation, it causes men to become weak-willed, ineffectual, and compliant. So, like, that seems like sort of
that just happens naturally. Women don't do that.
So
but that's always the joke, right? Is it's but like, then he's whipped.
I'm right there with you, Dan. But like, so the point in favor of feminist is definitely Uhura takes control, but not only does she take control, she calls the female security guard. She doesn't say I'm calling the female security guard. She's just calling a security officer who's female, and then gets her to get people together, right? So that's point number one, is that they're showing not only Uhura but other females on the Enterprise crew in positions that are non-standard for females. Right?
Okay. Well, Spock says at one point, he says, instruct female engineer to divert ship's energy to the deflector shield. That's another point. We never really find out what they do with that deflector shield, but he doesn't know the name of any of the female engineers.
So
nobody does.
But that's a later, I'm going to do the counterpoint. It's going to go back and forth. So point number one is Uhura, security officer. In the 1970s, that is not a standard female role.
Okay.
So that is a progressive feminist perspective, presumably, right? Again, we're dudes saying this, so we're going to be wrong about all this, but that's point number one. Now, counterpoint, as you noted, is that it's the evil women sucking the semen metaphorical semen, the essence, literally the essence of the men,
which is not a progressive.
Psychologically, we're supposed to think of that as a semen analogy, and yes, one could argue that's not as progressive. But then the counterpoint to that is that these women are portrayed as wrong, and that if you pursue this as a woman, if you pursue this strategy, you will ultimately be left unsatisfied because you're gaining immortality through this manipulation of the men, but you are, as they said themselves, you are trapped, you have no love, you have no life, your whole life is dedicated to sucking dry the next round of dudes.
And to that point also... Next round of dudes.
It can't be that bad.
To that point,
metaphorically sucking them dry. But no, in this case, literally as well.
It seems like to that point as well, they're redeemable as well. Just because they did this doesn't mean they're just like, oh, fuck these motherfuckers, they're totally redeemable.
It's part of their evolution.
Right. Which is on the one hand it's kind of a jump in the sense that they fucking kill people every 27.653 years or whatever, but they were just trying to survive, even though it's kind of sketchy what they were doing. Let's try not to judge too hard, I guess, is their stance on it. And I think we've talked about this before. Like, for example, in Picard, when what's her name, Daystrom?
Daj?
No, Daystrom. Why am I forgetting her fucking name?
Girardi?
Yeah, Girardi.
Yeah.
Agnes Girardi.
Agnes Girardi. Aggie, that's right. So how she
murdered a guy.
Yeah, she murdered
Aggie.
a guy, and so like they just kind of, and we had that discussion. So I guess, and you had said then that's kind of a Star Trek thing that happens here and there. And
You murdered a couple guys, but it's okay.
Murdered a guy.
No, I think
she's a space floozy.
You brought up an excellent example because now we have this example to add to that pile of like, yes, you can do horrible things. But if once the context is understood, and if you are in a redeemable position, and you want to be redeemed, of course, I think is always
Or if the
key.
Romulans brainwash you and make you do
it's interesting. So this is a tricky episode because it kind of goes a little bit back and forth with that, because even at the end, Uhura gets together the all-female security squad. They go down there and they fucking kick some ass.
They kick ass.
But as Dan already noted, then things don't ultimately get resolved until Spock says, tell the female engineer. And Spock even says, send down all-female security crew, which is weird because it's almost like they're undercutting Uhura, because Uhura, in this point of the episode, Uhura has already called up the security officer and said to put together an all-female crew. But then Spock calls her later, and it's kind of like when you're when somebody gives somebody gives you advice to do something that you were already planning to do.
Yeah,
it's annoying because send down an all-female security crew.
I really hate that.
Yeah, it's really fucking annoying.
Really,
I had to tell that guy how to do it. It's like, no, you didn't. You just started fucking telling me.
It's like, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. But so, there's pluses and minuses to this. It's 1973. It's a show marketed at kids, but for the scene of Uhura and her team of very diverse people coming down and just fucking mowing down all these white ladies.
I don't know what those ladies were trying to pull though. They're just like, get her, and they're like, okay, and they
the lady
zap them all with
on
their
the
phasers.
planet, she's like, oh shit.
Yeah, right.
She's like,
look at her eyes.
You're not welcome here, but like you could tell her like her eyes go like, boo. She's like,
oh, you're gonna fucking blow my ass away.
So, but the other thing is, Spock told him to divert the ship's energy into the deflector shield. First of all, Uhura's like, well, we already tried that. He's like, well, do more of it. That was the answer. It's like, okay.
Woman, just do more. Woman.
Yeah, right. Why didn't you think of that?
Try harder, woman.
Yeah, and we were, and like I said before, speaking of skipping sort of like explanations, I'm not clear what they did exactly with the deflector shield.
The goal was to try to block or minimize the signal that was getting to the ship that was affecting the male brains. But they didn't explain the signal clearly.
I guess that's true.
Because they were trying to explain the signal itself was doing something to the men, right? That's the implication. Although it reads as more of a hormonal interaction, but obviously that's how do you do that across space?
That's a good point.
So again, I think in an hour-long episode, they would have laid down some more breadcrumbs and laid down a little bit more explanation to make it a little bit clearer. In this case, it's sort of, the main beats of the story are what they're trying to get across, and they do so successfully.
Do you think
breadcrumbs are delicious?
Do you think Leonard Nimoy?
Nimoy.
I think I heard someone say that once.
Sensor.
Do you think Leonard Nimoy did that sexy singing song to unlock the door?
I was going to ask that because he was all like,
that was hilarious. I was like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was
hilarious. It was hilarious.
I was like, did he make that noise?
The second time through, it was hilarious. The first time I watched this, it freaked me the fuck out. And then there was that scene, when they all go in that, the urn in the middle of the garden.
They should have looked in the urn.
Yeah, first of all, it's funny that they didn't look in the urn. That was a little weird, but okay, whatever. Plot device.
They had no idea that urn could be gotten into the whole episode because they're like, wait, they're at the urn with the water. Oh,
So I think I've mentioned before that my route to getting into Star Trek in the first place in the 1980s was I started with the animated series. I used to be terrified of Star Trek. There was something about Star Trek that freaked me the fuck out. I didn't like it when I saw, because TNG was airing and I'd see Worf or something and it freaked me out. But I somehow stumbled on Nickelodeon and stumbled into TAS.
They played it a lot.
And I got into it, and then I eventually got into TOS and then everything else, and have been a Trek fan ever since.
Because back in the day, like TOS was on like syndication, like all over.
Yeah, once I went through all the TAS episodes multiple times on Nickelodeon, that's when I started seeking out the TOS reruns. But
like if you went to the Outer Banks and they have those weird other like syndication channels.
Yeah, it would be on a different channel at a different time.
Yeah,
when you're traveling around. But I have such a vivid memory that came back to me watching this episode of them floating in the gourd. There was something about that I had not seen this episode probably since maybe the 90s. I've watched some of the other animated series episodes here and there over time, but really, honestly, they were hard to access for a long time because Nickelodeon wasn't playing them for a long time, and they weren't on. There was no on demand for a while.
You had to get that shit on DVD,
and even that I think was tricky. I don't even know if they had that.
Did it freak you out?
I knew somebody that got that shit, but it was hard to get.
But no, when I watched this, it's not that it freaked me out. It was just this weird.
Yeah, sometimes images do that.
And at this stage, when we have access to so much nostalgic stuff. It's great on the one hand, but it also dulls our nostalgic response in that we can load up Disney Plus or YouTube or whatever. We can see Darkwing Duck and Gummy Bears. We can watch old movies. We can watch any old movie. Remember, we even found that weird Canadian movie about the robot grandma.
That's fucked up, dude.
So you can like find these things that you remember as a kid. So it gets rarer and rarer.
Electric Grandma.
Yeah, Electric Grandma. Fuck that shit.
Fuck that.
That is disturbing shit.
Don't, dude. Don't.
It's designed to be a happy, friendly little Canadian thing, but
you should watch that Avonlea show. That's much better than Electric Grandma.
But you have these nostalgic events like I had watching this episode. It's rarer and rarer, and it's very difficult to describe. But all I'm saying is when I saw them floating there, that scene of them floating, kind of shot from above, that just triggered something in my brain. I was like, I remember that. I don't remember the rest of this episode. I remember that, and I don't know why, but it stuck out of my head. Maybe it was a fear I had as a kid, getting stuck in an urn.
I've had that too, and
I can't getting stuck in an urn.
No, the only thing that you
got that thing where your teeth don't. Your mouth doesn't close or something.
No, but that's a dream. That's different than. Which actually, where I was gonna go with that is I know what you're talking about. And I can't name an example off the top of my head, but the closest I can come to is I had a dream when I was a kid that I was in some coliseum with giant statue monsters attacking me, and like for the longest time,
that was a past life.
For the longest time, I remembered it as real, even though my head is like that's not real. But it's like I remember it as being real.
Everybody has cooler dreams than me.
Yeah, we gotta work on that. Jesse.
So that scene with the urn.
Come on, Jesse, get with the program. Get some good dreams going.
God damn.
So the part with the urn, first of all, like going back to like them not understanding that they had an urn, they went around this thing. They're in the urn. They didn't think to look at it. And that scene where they're drowning in the urn or whatever, Uhura goes, they're drowning. Where are they? And Tila goes, the nearest water accumulation is many cusecs away from here.
What is a cusec?
It's it's 1/4 of a parsec.
And you think it's part of
it can't be that.
It's one half of a John Cusack. No, apparently it's a unit of flow, especially of water, equal to 1 cubic foot per second.
Is a John Cusack shorter than a Joan Cusack?
Yes, I think that's true. She's pretty big person. So anyways, she's going, the nearest water accumulation is far away from here. And she's like, it looks like a pool or tub. She's like, it's the urn in the garden. Like, why didn't she think of that immediately? It's like they had no understanding that an urn...
Is a Cusack shorter than an Arquette?
They had no understanding that they could have hidden the urn, and then they didn't put it together that there's something filling with water. Maybe it's the fucking urn in the middle of your courtyard, you know? But no, there's some water place far away.
I don't think they're not portrayed as being particularly clever. They're quote unquote advanced, but I guess that they are so focused now on the obtaining and sucking of juices.
Yeah, like they had a fucking door that had a lock that you could thwart with magnets.
Yeah,
yeah,
and a door, and
that's what they had to do before they had data,
and some supercomputer that you could sing at.
Before you had data to pry the door open.
Yeah, they had to use magnets.
You had to use a fucking magnet.
They had headbands that glowed when the women got close, like Frodo and his sword that could detect orcs.
Frodo.
Yeah.
And then I was also reminded of the part where it's like, I am no man. I thought they were going to pull something like that in the episode, which they kind of did, but not as...
Did we already mention the freckle lady?
Oh yeah, no, we didn't. But I was noticing that too. It's like, hey, they included some kind of spunky looking freckle girl.
Yeah, it was a Punky Brewster kind of super freckle person.
Yeah.
Which was cool. I'm very excited that they included that. It was somewhat awkward. Again, getting back to this debate between the pro-feminism versus, I don't know, neutral or whatever, is yes, they put together an all-female security team.
Are Freckles pro-feminism?
And it was a very diverse team.
What were their motives?
But the male gaze of
Yeah,
the direction,
They were trying to say
exactly.
buddy
the male
dumbass
gaze
man.
of what was his name? Hal Fatherton. What's his fucking name?
Hal Sutherland.
Hal Sutherland. Fatherton. But you can see the male gaze all over
having
this.
sex with her.
And the male gaze in this episode, there's pluses and minuses to it, because in on the planet, it serves the purpose of accentuating when the camera is panning over all these blonde white ladies with their blue eyes and showing them hanging out with the dudes all sexy. That the male gaze works there, because the point is to show that these men are under the thrall of these women. Where it is less great is when they put together the all-female security crew and they do a very similar pan, which you could say like, oh yeah, look at all these diverse females we're sending down. But the way the camera moved was, it was very male gazy. Let's just say this. And I can comment on that because I'm a dude, and I was like, ugh.
This guy's a dude, if nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah, male gazy. A little bit male gazy, but
for some reason,
It was the 70s.
For some
60s,
reason,
70s, same thing.
For some reason, McCoy, they brought out stimulants. Cortropine, which is another thing you look up on Google and it directs you right back to Star Trek. Cortropine is a strong stimulant included in standard issue Starfleet.
Isn't
medical
that great
kits.
when you're like watching something or reading something and you're like, you look up a word on the internet and like the reference is like what you're watching or reading and you're like, well, fuck.
According to his medical file, this is from memoryalpha.fandom, Spock was prescribed 5 milligrams of cortropine 3 times a day when he had himself admitted to the psychiatric ward of Starbase 5, Point of Light. Anyway, so I thought that was interesting that they
use it again.
They use it in this episode. McCoy whips out the cortropine because I guess they're getting old and tired because they wake up all old. I think
super shrivelly.
Yeah, and so I guess they have the cortropine to make them feel better or something.
But they don't talk like old people.
No, they don't.
No, they just talk like tired people.
They don't talk like, oh, Spock.
And Spock's got like a longer lifespan, so he can last longer, but he still can like barely climb up those steps.
He can linger longer.
Crawls up those steps.
He was kind of
and those chicks are at the bottom of the steps, like just looking at him.
And they're like, what is he doing? What does he think he's doing?
He was kind of a dick when he was telling them that too. He's like, I've retained more strength than any of you.
Yeah, he's a Vulcan. What are you going to do?
Yeah, right.
That's how they act.
So I guess that transporters can now be used as an alternate form of like an implementation of a fountain of youth.
You can do all kinds of shit with transporters.
So they discovered you can like have infinite. You can live for eternity because of transporters. Now there was a 99.7.
Well,
odds were 99.7 to 1 that you were going to die or whatever, or that you would make it.
The TNG episode where they find Scotty and he's
stuck in the pattern.
That's true. He's in the pattern buffer.
Stuck in a thing, and like that's why he's been able to stay alive.
Well, what I thought was cool about that was that this is something you see a lot on, especially on TNG. The using the pattern buffer, using the person's pattern has come up a number of times in TNG and Deep Space and other Star Trek series as well, but a lot on TNG where they can use it to compare something or to repair somebody or whatever, and or like the Scotty example. But it's kind of neat.
You can get some tea.
It's kind of neat to see that actually goes back all the way to this, right?
Yeah,
and I think they did some stuff like that on TOS, but I think this might be the first example of kind of this type of thing. Where they use the pattern buffer to sort of recover somebody. It's a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina, solution, but it works. It works within the context of Star Trek, so can't complain too much.
So when Spock, I know we probably have to get wrapped up in a bit here. Spock,
nah, man.
This episode This episode establishes that Spock can just casually communicate telepathically.
Yes.
So that's another thing. It's not just a mind meld. I mean, with the alien thing, he did some kind of intense shit, but this one, he was just like, hey, psst, you, come over here,
And they have that on Enterprise with T'Pol and Trip Tucker at one point. They now it's because of other stuff going on, but essentially they sort of get a little mental connection while she's meditating. She's, able to communicate
it seems like,
with him.
Yeah, but it seems like they have to, they really have to be under special circumstances usually. This one was just kind of like, a Beta Z kind of talking to someone.
They're just making, they're like, well, we got to resolve this story somehow.
Yeah.
I do think.
Not a big deal. It's like whatever.
I do think it was interesting and important that although these people were all the male crew members who, at least the landing party went down, I guess all the male crew members were under the thrall of these space ladies. it was cool that eventually Kirk's duty weighed more than his penis. In other words, he, despite being all the control,
It was all that Taco Bell he ate. His duty weighed more than his penis. It's all that Taco Bell.
Yeah. Now, and I suppose somebody could argue this is an inconsistency, but they were clearly like mega under their spell to start with. But once they started getting drained, it seemed like it was harder for the women to control them because they were able to run away and hide.
It's different than the blink of the eye where it was like, oh, I just met this groovy chick and that changed everything. And it's like, they were like, well, we woke up and everything sucked.
Do you think, so you're saying you think they had less control over them as time went on because they were older and more feeble and they could draw less energy from them?
Maybe. I mean, that would be a sort of a headcanon type of explanation because it's not very clear. It's just all of a sudden, it's like after they're drained, you could argue, well, they realized and that snapped the spell a little. But they were clearly still fighting to overcome it. You know, Kirk was having to sort of, argue with whatever strength he had left. He had to sort of convince himself as well as others, that his duty, I have duties to attend to. I have to go back. And I think the idea there is that it's so ingrained in Kirk, in all of them to one degree or another, but especially in Kirk, that his duty is so deeply ingrained that it can overcome the powerful spell of these alien space ladies. Again, I don't know exactly how to interpret that, but I do think that the implication is buried in there that that's what's going on, that he is a truly honorable, duty-bound person, no matter what else is going on. So it's almost a reflexive action. His reflexive action is, I've got to get back to the ship. I've got to save the ship.
One other thing that I didn't know how to interpret, speaking of interpretation, is when they, go through the transporter thing and get their youth back through the transporter technology. Uhura tells Kirk that he's more handsome than ever.
Yes, and, that's a problematic statement.
Yeah, so given the context of the episode and everything else that was going on, I don't know, maybe given the context, you could take it's like, oh, haha, that's a fun joke. That's a fun joke, but I don't know. I was not. That's why I wasn't sure how to interpret it because I couldn't.
It was weird.
It's not that I'm going to lose sleep and be like, oh my gosh, am I supposed to hate or love it? I think who cares? But I'm trying to figure out like. Yeah, it was something kind of.
I think this is.
What were they going for?
I think this is another example of it squished because they have reverted their aging process, right? So they made them look normal. So Kirk does not look younger or more handsome or whatever. He looks the same as he did when he went down to the planet, right?
Mm-hmm. That's not what Uhura said. She said that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, my point is that's what her statement is weird precisely because we know he doesn't look any different because why would he look any different?
Yeah. So why was she complimenting on him on that?
So you could argue that if this story was longer, if this was a 50-minute episode, they probably would have spent more time aging and more time dealing with that and having comments about, oh my God, and they would have maybe had a whole undercurrent about how so much of Kirk's perceived power is through his youthful, he's known to be a young captain, so through his youthful energy, through his handsomeness, through his ability.
There would have been more build-up.
His charm.
And like you would have only seen them like super old like at the end.
And more importantly, the one of the sub-lessons of the episode would have been that despite being aged and weak, Kirk was able to overcome and still be the captain he needed to be.
Yeah,
and that would have been the message.
It's all about duty.
It feels like that message was supposed to be there and it just wasn't. Because then saying you're as handsome as you're handsomer than ever, that would make sense if you had this whole half an hour of like Kirk battling with, can I still be a captain when I'm not young and I'm not handsome?
That's a good
point. The only thing that I could draw from it, given on what we saw, is that this episode was about women trying to sort of maintain their youth and beauty and all that stuff. But this time, the man becomes young again, and this time, instead of the men being drawn to the women because they're so beautiful, Uhura's making a joke like, aha, you're the young, beautiful one now, And so that's why I was kind of wondering, it's like, I don't know what they were going.
We saved your ass.
Yeah, I know. We shot all those fucking white ladies.
Yeah, so I didn't know what they were going for with that, but yeah.
Okay, I have one last question before we wrap it up, which is that whole immortality thing, did that just come in like right at the end of the episode, or because I don't remember them talking about we're like this because we're immortal now.
Right, that was only mentioned like
right at the end.
Yeah, it was at the end. Yeah, and it was a confusing part, and I'm guessing it has to do with the immortality. When she talks to Uhura, Tila goes at the very end. She goes, "How quickly will we become as other women?" And Uhura says, "Dr. McCoy says it should only take a few months." Now, what do they mean by as other women? Do they mean no longer needing to suck the life energy from people?
Yeah,
is that what they? I mean, is that what they mean? Like, I don't know what she means.
Need to suck.
Yeah, well, yes, I do think because the earlier in the episode they say that what happened was their species arrived at that planet because of a cataclysm on their planet.
Yeah, and
they only realized too late that the herbs and potions or whatever on the planet,
something on the planet was draining them.
Right,
was draining them, draining the men. But then the women like rapidly evolved some sort of like
they were secrete some hormone.
So then they would just be so.
But they didn't say they would live forever. And then they also didn't say they said the men are in another compound. Was that just a lie?
Yeah,
and there's no men, or
there's all their dead bodies.
I don't think there's any men.
There's their dead bodies.
I assume that as well, but it's very confusing.
Right. So that's why I thought the end was confusing in that statement because I mean, so first of all, do they just need men? They could probably get anyone, but I guess they were only able to attract the men. I guess that's
well,
the other thing.
This shares a lot in common with Wink of an Eye. The main difference being the ending is different in that Wink of an Eye, they decline any help from the Federation or decline to be removed from the planet or anything like that. Whereas in this case, they take up the offer and then they shoot the thing. I'm not exactly clear why shooting the thing is important, but I guess that's the thing that sends the signal.
You always got to shoot the thing.
But yeah, again, some of these things just not fully explained.
So when they talk about becoming as other women, so the thing that was excreted by the plants, it made them need to suck energy out of people to live. And I guess is when they get away from the plants, were they aging just as quick? I guess they were aging just as quickly as the men, but unlike the men, they were able to suck their lifeblood to live longer.
To counteract the effect.
I'm not sure what kind of negative shit was actually happening to them.
That was probably just the original population of women. And it was always them, and somehow we're just supposed to assume that. And then when they start mentioning the stuff about the immortality, we're just supposed to be okay.
So what happens?
Is that supposed to be implied that when you see all those ladies first off that it's oh well these are some sort of ageless women is that some sort of imagery and some sort of communication that we're missing out on generationally? Is it some kind of 60s thing? 70s thing?
That could be too. I don't know what happens to them though if they don't get the suck the energy from people. They never really explain what happens
if the Enterprise didn't show up at the appointed time.
I don't think that ever happens.
Why do they feel compelled to do it? What are they gaining from doing this if they live forever anyways?
I think they need the juices.
And then they keep going. It's vampire.
They need the juices to keep going, right? But they were happy now that they're mortal. So if they could, it's a vampire, meaning they live forever. They're just miserable and it's like a heroin addict.
They're
thing.
miserable, yeah.
They're being a heroin addict.
Happier now that they're
and the implication is that it's tied to the planet, that once they get off the planet,
free.
Then whatever effect the planet is having is no longer going to be a problem for them.
It's so I guess that was I wasn't clear on is what negative effect were they having by not sucking the blood, and they feel shitty like a vampire.
It's like blood. Heroin. That's good because it is from the 70s.
Heroin. Okay, that must be.
So the people who did this episode did a bunch of psychedelics, and they did a bunch of LSD and shrooms, and then they did a bunch of heroin.
Somebody had a little bad episode with the heroin.
This episode is about the positive and negative aspects of doing drugs in the 1970s.
1973, that's what it's all about.
Kirk says, "Beam us up, Scotty," by the way. He doesn't say, "Beam me up, Scotty." They always say how he never actually says that. He got close. He said, "Beam us up, Scotty."
Yeah.
And then I forgot to mention the last episode, the scene where the antimatter was exploding. Every once in a while, the animated series has a scene where a bunch of shit's exploding too. I don't even remember the Enterprise was all going.
I think a lot of the Star Trek stereotypes seem to come from the animated show.
Could be. I mean,
you see a lot more of the suggesting a lot of the stereotypes that comedians in the 80s and 90s that's what we're thinking of. We're thinking of these bits that comedians did in the 80s and 90s when they're goofing on Star Trek. That's what all this Star Trek sort of like, stereotypes.
And it could be a cyclical thing in that there's some stereotypes from the original series that the animated series sort of leans into some of those stereotypes. And then those stereotypes are modified and accentuated in the 80s and 90s.
Because it's sort of a streamlined show that was intended for children. It's a Saturday morning cartoon.
Speaking of it, in the narration at the beginning, Kirk does the sort of the pause thing. He goes, the Starship Enterprise, and he doesn't do that in the narration of the show. He doesn't do any kind of Kirk cadence.
It's just extra Kirk.
He does the extra Kirk cadence even in the narration. So
in the narration,
but that could have just developed because for example,
in the narration,
Homer Simpson, Cartman. As the seasons go on, they become more exaggerated, more of a caricature.
Yes,
and so it's as things go on.
A loop.
So as things go on, it could just because this over time a loop. Yeah, exactly.
Culture, some sort of a fractal, like a self.
Yeah, exactly. The culture feeds back on itself.
Almost 90 years old.
Who's almost 90 years old?
William Shatner.
Yeah, he is.
He's 89 years old.
And he's all on Twitter, like yelling at people. Yeah.
I can't believe I've never thought to be like, William Shatner. I've never really thought that.
Because his name is Shat is the past tense of shit.
I never thought about that either.
He preempted it. Yeah, it's like you never occurred to me.
I'm not that mean. I'm not that mean spirited.
Well, I mean, it's not like I'd start saying it all around town, but it's like things pop into your head.
I want you to start saying it around all town, saying it all.
Hey, man, did you hear about William Shatner?
What? What'd you just say?
William Shatner hat.
Ah.
Anyway, that's a whole nother kink. We already talked about that. So, all right, I think that does it for the Lorelei signal. And two cool episodes. The animated series is a trippy series. It's somewhat campy in some parts, but it's 100% worth watching. And you can blow through them pretty quick. They used to be on Netflix. I guess I think Jesse, you said they have them on CBS All Access.
I had
now,
to get
right?
CBS All Access because they were not available on Netflix.
So CBS All Access
is
an option.
Netflix America.
Yeah,
maybe other Netflix
elsewhere you might be able to.
Yeah,
find
people always talk about
Netflix UK has a bunch of shit that they don't have in America.
And
people are always talking about if you get a VPN or whatever, you can mask your location and then get shit from other.
I think also the anime series. I don't know how it is now because maybe CBS cracked down on it, but I think a lot of them were just on YouTube. Also, you could see them in pretty good quality on YouTube. But if you get a chance, totally give it a try. If you haven't seen it, I mean, it's Star Trek. It's written by original series Star Trek authors. I mean, DC Fontana, etc. I mean, these are proper Star Trek stories. There are some problems. Maybe some things it's a little constricted here and there, so it results in some story problems. On the other hand, they get to do some stories that they really could not have done on TOS otherwise, and have alien creatures and things like that are much more interesting than even the already very interesting stuff they were able to pull off on TOS. And since we're Lower Decks is starting up soon, and then there's going to be the Star Trek Prodigy, other cartoon that really is designed for kids. I mean, they're going to be very different, but have some fun. Go check out the animated series. And if you're going to be watching Lower Decks, you probably have CBS All Access or whatever else you're going to be accessing to watch that program. And there's a good chance that you'll be able to find the animated series.
There's a bunch of stuff on that CBS All Access,
and I wouldn't be surprised
besides just Star Trek.
And from what I've seen so far of Lower Decks, they seem to be going out of their way to really layer in every background shot and everything a lot of Star Trek lore. I've seen Suliban and Cardassians and humans and Vulcans, having a date at a table, in the background, those types of things. So TAS, I would not be surprised if we're not gonna see a huge number of references to TAS because of its pedigree as the original, the OG animated Star Trek series. So,
were there any people comments you wanted to
audience comment? No, I don't think there's any comments. I mean, there was some Lower Decks haters, but we already touched on
the usual sort of support
on that. Yeah, well, we get plenty of comments that are like, "Oh, great episode," or "That was cool," or I agree.
I love Dan. Yeah, I love Dan too. Dan's the best.
Everybody likes
thanks,
Dan.
Guys.
Yeah, most of the comments are actually about how much they love Dan.
Yeah,
which is
so fucking
that guy's
hot.
the great.
I'm so fucking hot.
I mean, he is.
What's he gonna say next?
Y'all don't know what you're missing if you're not following Dan. What is it? Dan _ Glaubitz or something on Twitter?
Oh, sorry. I'm going to say next is bloopity bloop bloop bloop. It's Dan_G_bits. That's my brand. Dan G Bits.
Dan G Bits.
BITZ.
Two underscores because Dan just wanted to make it that much more obnoxious to search for his name.
Well, I mean, how else are you going to know that it's not that it's Dan G Bits and not like Dang Bits
I'm not arguing
or
with it.
Dan G Bits?
You be you, man.
You're supposed to pronounce the letter G because that's my brand.
Okay, all right. So everyone out there, just if you don't want to piss Dan
I decided I've had a brand.
just make sure you treat Dan's brand well.
I mean, it's just all you have to do to have a brand is just say you have a brand, right?
Well,
Wouldn't it be cool if you could like underscore like a character already and just combine two characters, a character and an underscore? You
an underline.
You can't do that with a modern keyboard. It just doesn't happen.
I know. It's very frustrating.
What? I don't understand.
Underline. You have to hide.
Just use the underline, the underscore.
He wants
Just
to be able to have
under any sort of character,
an
like
underscore.
combine
an
two
underline, like
combine two characters. You can italicize them or make them bold.
You're talking about markup. You're marking up the character instead of you're taking the underscore.
I'm using the underscore in addition to a different character.
Yeah, an underline markup. Yeah, gotcha.
Anyway, I'm sorry. We're trying to end this fucking podcast.
And we're getting there because the next step is first we're going to tell you how to contact us. And then we're going to give you a really fucking good reason to contact us because related to the topic for next week's episode, right? So again, Lower Decks, we'll start covering that, August 8th, I guess, will be the first Saturday after that. So look forward to that.
We're going to do it August 8th.
Yeah, because, we got to watch the show. And then
watch
then we got to talk about it. And then we
I have that
podcast.
CBS shit, so now I can just watch it.
Jesse's going to be all over that
I'm going to see
shit.
it before you guys.
He will probably see it before us.
Dag, yo.
But what we want next week, we are going to discuss, we're doing something a little bit different. Instead of talking about a specific episode or movie, we're going to do a topic, and it's
word.
Oh yeah, word up, because
I'm Toppy the topic.
I'm Toppy the topic. So what we're going to do is we want to discuss just humor in Star Trek, just across the whole Star Trek universe.
This is
I was about to say about across the whole Star Trek enterprise.
So this is freeform.
Yeah, freeform. We want to hear from folks. Send us in examples. I'm really curious about two things from both my podcast co-hosts.
Whether you spell humor with a U or without a U.
Yeah, I spell it with a U to be pretentious. But if you're in England, you spell it with a U because you're normal. The goal.
I just do it because I'm better.
Yeah, you're better than everybody else. That's how it works.
Yeah, I mean that fits into pretension.
No, because pretentious is an admission.
Pretentious, moi. Anyway,
it's a status spelling.
What we want to talk about, we want to hear from you folks is what are some of your top favorite comedic moments or humorous moments? They don't have to be comedic necessarily, but top humorous moments, and also some moments that didn't quite work. Those are the two things I really think we want to have some lists of those things that we're going to talk about next week. Really favorite humorous moments and humorous moments that are problematic or didn't work or just weren't funny. And partly we want to do this because it'll be fun, but also partly because Lower Decks again is coming up and it's intended to be a more humorous side of Star Trek. That's the goal of that show in theory. We haven't seen it yet. We don't know if it's going to be successful. We don't know if it's going to be awesome. We're looking forward to finding out, right? But I figured, why don't we, before we watch that, gather together our thoughts about what are some of the really
This is
cool...
going to be a hard one to prepare for.
Well, you just think, and you
can we have 2 weeks for this?
No, it's got to be next week because the next week, yeah. But
a Friday, not a Thursday.
Our kind listeners are gonna email us, and
you get an extra day to do it, Jesse, because today's Thursday.
Yeah, and so we're gonna be able to search. We're going to be just type in funniest things in Star Trek. It's it won't be too difficult.
Okay.
You can use Google to help you out.
That's right.
But I just want to pull together some
The only
examples.
rule is there are no rules.
Oh, I forget that rule all the time.
And I think this will be it'll be a fun exercise. It'll make for a fun podcast episode, but it'll also be a practical exercise in the sense that if we are going to judge, if we are going to develop our subjective opinions about this Star Trek Lower Decks show, which is intended to be humorous, it's going to help us to have some context and discussion about how humor has been utilized both well and poorly in previous incarnations of Trek. It'll just give us a nice foundation upon which we can build. So I'm looking forward to that. But we do want to hear from the from the listeners out there what your thoughts are on that. And I think Dan could help me out. Dan, can you help us out with how people could send us in? Those things?
It's got context so we can protect the ones we love.
That's not what I was expecting you to say.
That was a joke.
Was it though?
At It's Got Star Trek on Twitter, Instagram, and also just type it in the Facebook.
Facebook. Hey, spaghetti.
You can do
spaghetti.
Do you remember the?
Shut up, you fudge.
Do you?
At It's Got Star Trek on social media.
Yeah, on social media. Jesse, do you remember the email address?
No.
Still.
Like you just did this week. You almost had it last week, and this week you're just like, fuck it,
I know.
I'm not even going to try.
You regressed. You regressed. Your failure last week. You gave up. I'm just kidding.
Can I give it a try, Dan?
I guess.
All right.
I don't think you'll do it though.
Feedback.
The tables have turned.
Feedback at It's Got Star Trek. If you want to email us, feedback at It's Got Star Trek.
It's Got Star Trek at feedbag.com.
It's none of those things. It's feedback at itsgotstartrek.com. At It's Got Star Trek on social media of all varieties. If you don't find us there, we're not on it.
Poop and Saproop.
You can find us on Reddit.
Poop and Saproop.
You can go to our website at www.itsgotstartrek.com. We had internet in the 90s, so we still say the www.
Poop and scoop.
It's just a cultural difference.
Poop and subscribe to our station.
Yeah.
Station.
Yeah. Bill and Ted 3. Preview came out today. Looks pretty good. Second preview.
Yeah, I'm psyched.
Looks better than the first one.
I'm worked up about it.
So,
like in a good way.
Send us in your thoughts about humor in Star Trek. Next week we'll discuss them, and then the following week we'll start.
It's about Joe Piscopo.
We'll start. Yeah. That's gonna come up.
There's gonna be a lot of good data moments, probably. Right?
A lot of data moments. Probably not as many Geordi moments.
No, he's not funny at all.
No, he might be in the funny scene.
But
I'm
he's
a big
like
fan
the
of
butt
Geordi,
of
but he won't be the punchline. He'll be well, he might be the punchline, but he won't be delivering the punchline.
He's the butt.
If you know what I'm saying.
I mean, Picard in the whole episode that we just reviewed, where he was worried about being late to that dinner, that's
humor. That's humorous.
That was like ongoing subtle background humor.
There was a lot of Picard humor.
Yeah.
Picard, that was a plot. The whole plot was humor on that one. The plot was the idea of humor.
So there you go, listeners. You got examples of the type of stuff that you can send us our way, and we'll have a fruitful discussion about that next week.
Examples.
But in the meantime,
example Mzadi.
Bear fruit.
That will be a goodbye from me, Patrick.
I'm Dan. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That was Jesse.
Yes, Jesse.
All right. We'll talk to you next week.
They are here. Oh, such wondrous ones. They honor us. I am Thela, the head female. Welcome, James Kirk. Dr. McCoy. Mr. Spock. Welcome.
The form is humanoid, but there are many internal differences. Their bodies appear to function on an unusual psychokinesis level.
First time I ever admired a body function.